Guess what? It's that time of the morning, that time of the afternoon, that time of the day, that time of the night. We're excited to be here. And I mention all those different variations of time, day, night, because if you're watching this show or listening on a recorded basis, it could be any time of the day or night. But we are live right now. This is where it gets confusing, John. We are live right now, Saturday morning.
So you don't want people to feel slighted if they're listening at a different time.
Right. Well, we welcome everybody.
Okay.
So even those that are teetering on the international date line. It is Garden America. We hope you had a good week. We are back ready to go as the weekend kicks off. John, we appreciate you being here. John's playing sick today, came off the bench. And
Injured,
you're going to be
sick.
You're going to be in the starting lineup. You're not sick, but you're in pain. Right?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit.
All right.
If you read the newsletter, you'd know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So there you go. So thank you for being here. Tiger, you're busy. Are we looking okay technically here?
I am making sure we are
Okay.
all set technically, and we're looking good. Things are running smooth.
Okay, so
everybody
far,
can hear us.
So far, so good. So strap in, fasten your seatbelts. Here we go with Garden America, and a good show lined up today. It might even be a great show. We don't know.
It's our second epiphytic show in a row, isn't it?
You see the theme? You see the theme?
That was good,
We're
right?
working into the tropics right now.
That was
very
good,
It's summertime. It's tropical
It
time.
is.
Did you notice the background on the newsletter?
Yes.
It's got all the Tillandsias in the background.
Right.
Took me a while to find that.
Took you a minute, huh? But yeah, we kind of, this is the time of year for Southern California that we, see all the hibiscus blooming. We see the
Yes.
plumeria blooming. All of our tropical plants, and it inspired me to kind of have a theme going on in the next few weeks. Seeing if we can cover some of these tropical plants. And I'm excited to talk with Andy Cuffel from Cuffel Farms this morning because
We've had him on before, haven't we?
No, first time.
Really?
Yeah.
First time ever.
Wow. His first time to even ever be on the phone with a radio show.
First time
on
in
Facebook Live.
First time in 30 years of doing this show, Brian.
Yeah.
So Andy is going to be talking about, again, like you mentioned.
Tillandsias. Okay, that's his specialty. But when I was talking with him, I talked about our trip to Costa Rica and how inspired we were to see the Tillandsias, the Bromeliads, the orchids, all the epiphytes up just in their natural native state as we're just driving down the highway and we just see them up in these trees.
Look at that orchid up there in that tree.
Yeah, and I'm trying to actually get a picture. He created this fence, and we'll talk about it more during the interview, that he has them just, these Tillandsias just in the fence. So, he has really good ideas. It's not just, little decorative Tillandsias to have in your kitchen, but you can use them in the landscape. So we're going to talk about that.
You know what surprised me a little bit? Maybe it wouldn't surprise you because you guys are native Californians. But in Michigan, we had hardy hibiscus. They're perennials. They die to the ground, and then they'd come up in the spring, and you get a kind of more like maybe a Rose of Sharon type flower. They were pink. And if you're in Michigan, that kind of reminds you of a tropical hibiscus, I guess. But I didn't realize all the breeding that had gone on over the years. And when we were at the Huntington Gardens on Wednesday, we walked by some of the hardy hibiscus that must have been new. And you were looking at flowers the size of dinner plates. I mean, they were gigantic.
Even bigger than the hibiscus
that
I have.
Right.
And those are very big.
Yeah. So they were bigger than that and impressive as impressive as a tropical hibiscus, I thought. Have you seen any of those?
The giant squid also, they have eyes the size of dinner plates.
Especially when a car's coming.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're not as pretty as hibiscus, though.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
The size of those hibiscus is definitely dramatic. But the other thing that I'm just so impressed with is the color schemes that they have nowadays.
Yeah, right.
I remember just yellow and red hibiscus or versions of yellow and red.
Well, I know you like the one with the dark leaves, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, these were, dinner plate size, like that big. I'm not exaggerating. Yeah, it's got to be 12 inches across with dark leaves.
With that burgundy kind of reddish foliage?
Maybe not quite as dark.
But it's not just
dark.
a normal green.
No, not green at all. It was like a black green.
Whoa. See, that's fun.
Yeah, that is
you know?
fun. Exactly.
Like that
And
is some
different
neat
colors
stuff.
like reds and
Yeah.
purples and
Yeah. What is yours that's speckled? What's the
Yeah,
name on that one?
it's speckled. What is it? What did?
It's a red and yellow speckled flower.
Right. I'm trying to remember what.
I don't know.
We call the hibiscus.
I gave you two, and
Only one survived.
and I told you to make sure you
Label them.
labeled them.
Anyway, but Tiger's right. They are red,
Yours-
yellow, speckly.
Yours looks like
And
a
they're
red
giant.
flower had hibiscus, and somebody walked by with a paintbrush and just was cleaning it off,
Right.
with
Yeah.
yellow paint.
And
But,
those
yeah, they're
tropical hibiscus, the really exotic ones, are hard to get now.
Yeah.
That's what you said. Hang
Yeah.
on to what I have.
Yeah, because Hidden Valley hibiscus closed down. They retired, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who did all the breeding and all the collecting on those.
Yeah.
But it's doing well. It even blooms in the wintertime. So like it blooms now and it blooms in the winter.
Next show, I'm going to bring in all my plumeria blooms. I've got about 8 varieties blooming now.
Mine just started to bloom
Really?
within the last week.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah.
It does look. Yeah, it's, you know what? Some of the plants just thrive on this heat.
Oh, they do.
just love it. You know, others are like, when's winter going to come?
Yeah.
Purslane
hot.
loves heat.
Oh, goodness.
Have you ever noted the weed purslane, which I guess is
It's
edible
kind of
also?
like a little bit of a succulent
Right.
weed.
Like one day you see a little sprig, and the next day you go out and it's spread like 10 to 20 inches.
Grows like seaweed.
Yeah.
So the next time I get a hibiscus bloom, I'll take a picture of it,
Yeah.
and then we can take a look at it together.
If you go back to
Sit
the old
around the fire.
newsletters, we put your hibiscus in there maybe 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, so people go back to an old newsletter, right?
Well, I'm saying that's how we could find the name, because if we go back,
that's
it'll
right,
be in
yeah.
the newsletter.
I can look at my phone as well. So Andy is our guest today, as you mentioned. His last name again is?
Cuffel.
Cuffel, Andy Cuffel. And John, you have, as you always do, the quote of the week, which we all love.
You seem.
It's always near and dear to us.
I remember it was from Albert Einstein,
Yep.
too.
Yep.
But how am I going to find it, Brian?
Yeah, it's on your phone. You go to the newsletter. It's on the top of the newsletter each and every week. Those that receive the newsletter.
I thought I had it. You know what happens is that normally I have it in my Hotmail, and it's there again. For some reason, it started going into spam.
You spammed yourself is what you
Yeah, I
did.
was spamming myself. But anyway, the quote of the week is from Albert Einstein, and he said, "We all know that light travels faster than sound. So that's why certain people appear bright until you hear them speak."
That is such a great quote. That is so good.
Oh,
Seems,
he was clever.
especially during political seasons, it seems really appropriate.
Speaking of political season, you need to have some Will Roger quotes coming up here
Oh, yeah.
as we get into the fall and winter
Oh,
months.
yeah.
He always had good ones
Absolutely.
Yeah.
when it came to politics, right?
So we got a couple of 2 or 3 minutes before our first break. We'll bring on Andy after
the parties
break.
were a little different back in Will Rogers' time, and he was a Democrat.
Oh, I thought you were thinking like the birthday parties,
Oh, no.
company parties.
And he said that in one of his stand-ups, he says, "I'm not a member of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat."
It's good.
The other thing this time of year with the landscape that I'm seeing, besides all of the tropicals taking off, is what would Tacoma be? Like the plant. It's not a tropical, is it? They look
I would say
tropical
it's-
to me, like the
yeah.
Cape honeysuckle. Like
Yeah, I would say they're probably Mediterranean type
Okay.
plants.
they thrive
Yeah.
in this warm,
They do
humid.
like the
Right.
heat.
I've got these ones with these giant yellow flowers right now, and then the smaller version with the orange flower. They are going gangbusters, and then the hummingbirds go crazy.
How much
after
water
that.
does it require?
Not a lot.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
They're not drought tolerant.
Yeah, I was
but,
gonna say it's one of those plants. The more water you give it in the heat,
Yeah.
it
Right.
grows and shows it, but it doesn't need
Right.
it to survive or
In other
look
words, it's
good.
appreciative. I don't need it, but
Yeah.
thank you.
But you're welcome because I'm going to grow
Yeah.
to 12 feet tall in
Sure.
a week.
And feed all your hummingbirds while I'm at it.
Do you
Yeah.
still have that? I think I gave you a purple spike. It's kind of a tropical plant and puts out a long purple spike.
I'm trying to think. I feel like
Anyway,
yes.
that's one that just took off during the heat for me. And the bougainvillea tree's in full bloom.
Oh,
It looks awesome.
oh, that's fun.
Except that it's leaning a little now because there's a gopher in that area.
Oh,
Oh,
my
goodness.
gosh. My gosh.
The gopher, it's never ending with the gophers.
Seriously.
Okay, well, I think it's time for our first break.
All righty.
That's going to do it for segment number 1. We're going to bring Andy on after the break. So, of course, do stay with us. I want to welcome those on Biz Talk Radio. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors, major sponsor Fertilome, keeping us on the air, keeping us honest each and every week. So stay with us. I'm going to take a break for Biz Talk Radio. I'm Brian Main, John Bagnasco, Tiger Palafox. This is Garden America. Welcome to your weekend. Stay right there. A lot more to come. We are back from the break. Thank you for tuning in. Garden America, as we blast off and take care of your gardening needs here each and every weekend. John Bagnasco, I'm Brian Main, Tiger Palafox. All right, let's go. We've got all the other business out of the way, Tiger, so let's bring Andy on and pull the train out of the station.
Pull the station out of the train.
Pull the station out of the train, yes.
Yeah, this morning we have a first-time guest joining us, Andy Cuffel with Cuffel Farms, a local tillandsia grower here in San Diego. Andy, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys. Happy to be here with you. John, I really enjoyed that quote this morning. I've been accused of looking brighter than I sound many times, so I'm actually glad to not be on video this morning so that people can only judge the sound.
Yeah, it's always good how he can kind of line those up for us. Andy, so, you have a funny story a little bit behind your tillandsia passion because, this isn't something that I would say you've always wanted to do. And tillandsias are kind of a unique plant in the plant world. So how did you get into growing these?
Sure. It was definitely a mistake, as most of the great things in life are. But, I'd say really what it's born out of is I've always been a person who's been a little bit obsessive about collecting things, about wanting to understand the ins and outs of things. And so, when tillandsias came into my life about 11 years ago, it was kind of the newest iteration of that. I grew up in Valley Center in an avocado grove. And so most of my experience with plants had been agricultural. And so when I was first introduced to tillandsias by a gentleman actually that I found on Craigslist that I was buying succulents from to kind of outfit my new yard, he had this air plant, and I had never heard of an air plant, wasn't familiar with the concept of a plant that didn't need to grow in soil, and that was kind of the hook right there, the idea that there's these plants out there that challenge everything that I already knew about plants, and that was fascinating to me. And then you pair that with seeing how many different sizes and shapes and colors there are and all that, and I was hooked.
Yeah. And so I think this is a great time to kind of expand our listeners' knowledge on the tillandsias, the air plants, bromeliads, epiphytes. There's a lot of different ones that don't require soil per se to be able to grow. So kind of give a little bit of a basic intro as far as what is a tillandsia, like where does it live and how does it actually grow?
Sure. Yeah, I think terminology is a great place to start because that was certainly something that was confusing for me in the beginning and seems to continue to be confusing. So just to kind of organize what we're talking about here. So Bromeliaceae is a family of plants. That's where you'll find all bromeliads. There's 56 different genera, and that, of course, includes pineapples. It includes Spanish moss. It includes tillandsias. But, when we talk about tillandsias, we kind of separate them from bromeliads. We say bromeliads when we're talking about these terrestrial growing plants, the ones that, we see in big box stores and nurseries and things like that. And then we call tillandsias air plants, which really refers to their epiphytic nature. But orchids and staghorns and epiphyllums and mistletoe are also epiphytes. So are they air plants? When we say air plants, we're mostly just talking about tillandsias. But it is good to know that they are in the Bromeliad family, and that the Bromeliad family is a very diverse family, full of different growing environments, growing needs. So, tillandsias are an epiphytic plant in the Bromeliad family. That's the best place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And, they're areas that they're native to, more tropical, right? A little bit more humid, better rainfall up in, areas in rocky mountain trees and things like that, right?
Yeah, I'd say mostly, but I think most people are surprised to find out that there are many xerophytic plants in the Bromeliad family that experience extreme periods of drought. Sometimes up to 6 months without a good rainfall. So I think Bromeliads are these really wonderful family of plants that can really find themselves fitting in with tropical plants, but they can also find themselves fitting in with drought-tolerant plants. And so we have this spectrum of mesic, more tropical-type plants, to xeric, more desert drought-type plants. And so you find a little bit of everything within the Bromeliad family, and even more specifically within tillandsias. But, most bromeliads, they are New World plants. You're going to find them growing in Central and South America primarily. We do have about a dozen tillandsia species that are native to Florida. There's a couple that are native to kind of southern Texas, but you're going to find most of them down in Central and South America.
And on that note, I did share a picture just this morning on our Facebook page of some images, a couple pictures of some images that you took, because you created a cool fence border in your landscape using tillandsias and I feel, I guess the best term, I don't know, there's this new fencing panel style that a lot of people are using. I think they call it hog wire, where it's the metal square grates, and you can build a wood border out of it, and you can use it as fencing or a deck cover or something. And the pictures show you've incorporated it looks like thousands of tillandsias into it, but you have your DG. It almost looks like a kind of a dry landscape, but you're using these, like we just said, a little bit tropical plants. So they kind of go in. They're very versatile, right?
Yeah, they really are, and of course it is species dependent. For me, I'm not somebody who likes to dote on plants a whole lot. I kind of want to find who's going to fit in with what we're trying to do around here. I can be a glutton for punishment, but when it comes to plants, I really try and stay away from things that are going to require a lot of extra attention or care. So I've really focused on the more xeric tillandsias and bromeliads, and so that's a lot of what you're seeing there. But yeah, more and more I myself discover, and I'm helping other people discover, that these plants are a lot more than we've understood them to be at this point. The fact that I have a south-facing fence in full sun all day full of tillandsias, that challenges what most people know these plants to be. So,
yeah.
The other factor, too, is it's a huge space saver for me. You're right. There is about 1,000 plants in that fence, and it takes up no, floor space in my yard. It's, a quarter acre is not a lot of space, but I'm able to do a lot with it by growing things vertically like that.
Yeah, and it looks really cool. I mean, talk about a conversation piece. I mean, you have that in your backyard, and the really neat thing about it is, you incorporate the different varieties, and so you have some with certain color foliage, some with certain color shape and size, and it really gives this the mosaic look on a fence, which it would normally be, just maybe like a wood panel fence or maybe that hog wire fence, and this really kind of makes a statement. Now, we're going to take a break. When we get back from the break, Andy, I do want to talk because, as you mentioned, you kind of created this, you have this passion for these plants, there's some really unique ones out there. And let's talk about some of the cool varieties that people can maybe think about growing themselves.
And, of course, those on Facebook Live, questions, comments for Andy, do let us know right there in the comments section of our Facebook page. Those on Biz Talk Radio, quick reminder, you can watch our show live each and every week. We kick things off at 8 o'clock on the West Coast, 11 o'clock Eastern Time Zone. Facebook page is Garden America Radio Show. Back after these messages, speaking of Biz Talk Radio, stay with us. We trust you had a good break. A much quicker break here on Facebook Live, a bit longer on Biz Talk Radio. Thank you to our sponsors on Biz Talk Radio, keeping us on the air, Fritolome, and the rest of you. Okay, back to it, Tiger, as we continue and learning about a lot of things here, plants that don't necessarily need dirt.
Yeah, exactly. They just air. You're good to
whatever.
go.
I'm good to go.
Isn't that a misnomer, though? I mean, and I'm sure that Andy's going to talk to us about how to take care of them, but they really don't grow on air.
Yeah.
I mean, they
grow. Yeah. They need a
do.
little bit more.
Yeah.
We're chatting this morning with Andy Cuffel with Cuffel Farms. And I want to take this minute real quick to say cuffelfarms.com. That's CUFFELFARMS.com. And you sell these plants online as well. So when we're talking about some of these varieties now, because as John mentioned, we're going to talk about how to grow them, but also some unique ones to, maybe grow. If you're looking for them, you can go to Andy's website and be able to order them online. So, Andy, being a collector, being someone who, created this passion, do these plants bloom? Are they just basically foliage? What's the deal there?
Yeah. So most tillandsias are determinate growers, which means that the bloom is kind of the end of any one individual plant's life. That is one of the most common misconceptions that I get when people come and visit me, here at the nursery or reach out to me online is, oh, well, don't hair plants die after they bloom? Well, sure, lots of plants, quote unquote, die after they bloom, but the idea is it's not simply perishing and you say that was fun and you throw it away. No, it's going to go into a period of reproduction now. And that could be in the form of producing seeds if it was pollinated or, of course, vegetative offsets. So, your one plant, once it goes into bloom, may yield you 2, 3, 4, 10 new plants from it. So most species in the genus are determinate growers. There are a few monocarps, some of the larger cloud forest growing plants. But for the most part, they're determinate. So every plant will bloom, and those take a variety of sizes and shapes and colors. Some, the entire foliage of the plant changes color to help attract pollinators. Some produce fragrant flowers. The flower shape, size, color, all of that, all of those are, evolutionary techniques to, adapt to the pollinators around them and the environment and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, every tillandsia will bloom.
And you say that they'll bloom. How long? Because like a bromeliad, that blossom can last for a very long time. And I know that when we talk bromeliads, when I say bloom, that spike is not the bloom, but they talk about oh, that's a plant that can stay like that for a long time. Are tillandsias something that they happen 2 or 3 days and then they're done? Do they last a few weeks? How do they bloom?
Yeah. So that will also be species dependent. In my personal opinion, for the most part, the structure of the bloom is really what's most impressive about these plants. And the flowers themselves, are fine, but some of the structures, the shape of the inflorescence is really remarkable. And yeah, that can take months up to a year sometimes to form. And then, once it is formed, it'll maintain its color for maybe another 6 months afterwards. So for some of these, larger growing plants, if you can grow them to maturity, you might, have the full experience of the bloom for, a year or more. But some of these, like if we're jumping over into other genera of bromeliads, Dilbergias, for example, their bloom comes and goes in about 2 weeks. So, it is all about energy transfers. Things that have a shorter bloom period tend to bloom more frequently, and things that have a longer bloom period tend to bloom less frequently. So there is that trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the varieties. Are there some that you're kind of excited about right now? Excited to get people excited about?
Yeah. So I'm talking to everybody here from San Diego. So I actually, from last week's show about orchids, I remember you guys kind of talking about, or Patrick talking about, finding the right plant for where you are. And when you look for information online, it's good to know where that person that's making the video is recording from, because maybe they have had great success in Pennsylvania growing this one plant, and that might not be true for somebody up in Seattle or down in Florida. So I guess I would take this opportunity to really plug local plant societies and bromeliad societies, and try and connect with other people in your area that already grow these successfully. That's also a really great way to build out your collection, and you can trade with other people and stuff like that. So I'd certainly say exploring what people are growing locally already is a really good option. I'd say for me, I still find that these plants overall have been done a little bit of a disservice, I think, in the way that they've been marketed, because where do you find them when you go to a garden store? You find them inside. And the reality is, if you have the ability, growing them outside is so much easier. And so my first encouragement to people would be, whatever it is that you choose to grow, if your environment allows it, grow it outside a little bit. In the same way that Patrick mentioned last week about orchids, getting them to rebloom requires that temperature change. The same is true for these plants. When you bring them inside and you give them kind of consistent temperatures, consistent humidity, pretty consistent light, they kind of just live in a state of dormancy. They're not getting those cues from nature that it's time to sleep, it's time to grow, it's time to bloom, all of that kind of stuff. So I'd say, one of the biggest misconceptions I've experienced is that these are, these great indoor plants. And while they can be, I'd say try growing them outside a little bit. You might have a completely different experience. So as I get into species, I just kind of want to say that off the top. But I do say that because most of the species that I've been interested in are the more dry climate, drought-tolerant plants. That's more of what I have here in San Diego. And if you're growing them inside, that's a little bit more like what they experience normally, drier conditions. So these are the more xeric plants. And I can give some examples, but sometimes what's helpful is just knowing what to look for. So when I say a xeric tillandsia, usually xeric tillandsias are going to be more gray, silvery, white, fuzzy in color. They're going to have a thicker, maybe stiffer leaf. These are all mechanisms that are helping the plant stay hydrated during long periods of drought, which they would experience in their natural environment. Tillandsias that are more green with thin needle-like leaves, or like soft green waxy leaves, those are going to be more of a tropical plant, and so they're going to want a little bit more water. They're not going to want as much light. So they do come from such a diverse range of climates. You do have the opportunity to incorporate them into a lot of different environments. But I'd say as far as what species are best, it really is so dependent on the environment that you're growing them that I hesitate to make too many general recommendations.
Yeah, and I think everybody has a different spot. Like your picture of them growing on your fence, full exposure. That's something that you can use a lot of the, like you're saying, dry varieties for. But maybe somebody in Encinitas that has a lot of trees on their property and it's shaded and they're along the coast and it's humid, they can easily incorporate some of the more tropical varieties there because they're going to acclimate just finely to that area. Now, how long?
Got a couple of minutes.
A couple minutes.
Yeah.
We might have to take a break in a minute, so I might cut you off because when somebody like you said, you encourage people to put these outside. These are not just keep inside on your kitchen table kind of plants. How would somebody, keep it outside? Are they going to, have to water this regularly? Where some locations where people can maybe keep them easily?
And what difference would we notice outside versus inside?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So Outside, one of the I think biggest advantages that I gained in growing plants was when I started using a light meter to actually measure how much light different areas of my yard and my home are getting. And so when I use terms like indirect light or filtered light, it's sometimes hard for people to conceptualize what that means. I'd say overall, most of these plants are going to prefer some sort of filtered light. And what I mean is, it coming through some sort of shade cloth, filtered awning, canopy of a tree, something like that, where the light is being diffused as opposed to completely blocked, like let's say a covered patio. Taking 3 steps into a covered patio, you might lose 80% of your usable light. And while it still feels like it's light there, there's just not as much as you might think there is. So, strong filtered light or strong indirect light or what I can, best recommend as kind of a general light requirement. And then as far as, watering, care, what the difference might be.
Hold on one sec, Andy. Before you get into the watering and care, I want to, because we are going to have to pause and I don't want to cut you off too much on that. So when we get back, we'll continue chatting with Andy Cuffel and Cuffel Farms.
And watering and care. So we'll keeping you up to date. So again, those on, let's see, Biz Talk Radio, Facebook Live. We are coming right back. Now, Facebook Live, of course, questions, comments for Andy and one of us right there on the comment section. Brian Main, John Begnasco, Tiger Palafox, thank you for tuning in. Facebook Live, Biz Talk Radio. This is Garden America. All righty, welcome back. For those tuned in on Biz Talk Radio, this is the final segment of Hour 1. Hour number 1, news coming up top of the hour. Hour 2 coming your way too, 6 minutes after. Facebook Live, it's one big, long, enjoyable show, hopefully. Tiger, Andy talking about bromeliads and lots of things that we didn't know. You can take them outside. You can grow them outside and maybe get some different results, Tiger.
Exactly. And before we start chatting with Andy, I'll say hi to my friend Debbie, who joined the show too and says "I" to me as well.
Yeah, hi, Debbie.
Hi and hi. Andy, before the break, you were just talking about kind of a general rule for tillandsias is kind of some indirect light or some kind of filtered light for them. And you were just about to kind of get into the watering. I think this is pretty the biggest point for people growing these air plants is watering. So what are some recommendations that you have in terms of watering these?
Sure. And I'd just like to say hi to Debbie as well. She didn't say hi to me, but I'm going to go say hi to her first. So, so I think watering is the thing, right? And I remember Patrick talking last week about how the biggest challenge people face generally is that they end up rotting or overwatering their orchids. And I would say the same is probably true of tillandsias as well. And I want to kind of bifurcate outdoor care versus indoor care because they are pretty different. So I'll start with outdoor care. So for example, here in San Diego, I didn't water for the first 5 months of the year. Between the rains, the lower temperatures, the fact that during winter they're mostly kind of in a more dormant state, they were getting what they needed, so I left them completely alone. I didn't water for the first time until about the middle of May.
Oh, that didn't sound good.
Yeah, you just cut off.
The temperature, but more importantly, the humidity. So like right now, humidity's been a little bit higher, and they're actually really loving this warmer temperatures with a little bit of moisture in the air. Mm-hmm. It's really the Santa Ana period that most of them have a tough time with. So when humidity drops down, below 10%, I might be watering every day or every other day just to try and help keep them hydrated. So it does fluctuate. I'd say the best thing that you can look for, most leaves on tillandsias, unless it's a filiform with, kind of needle-like leaves, most of the leaves are going to be naturally channeled a little bit, and that's to help try and capture moisture and nutrients. As those channels start to roll up and curl and almost form a tube, that's a really great indicator that the plant is starting to dry out. Or if the plant naturally has a nice curl to it, like Tillandsia streptophylla or Tillandsia xerographica, those curls are going to get a lot tighter as it starts to dry out. So sometimes rather than having a schedule, it's just better to kind of pay attention. If you're seeing that the leaves are starting to roll a little bit, probably time for a good drink.
And now, like in terms of how to water, your fence, do you use a water wand? Do you use some kind of mister? if somebody has them up in a tree, how would you recommend getting the water to them?
Yeah, so me personally, I'm just using my garden hose on the mist setting. I mostly just use tap water. I mentioned earlier I've kind of stayed away from the more sensitive species. There are some species, especially those kind of cloud forest species, that prefer pure water and, all of that kind of stuff. So I stay away from those. I'm fine on tap. And I just do it on the mist setting. And so, my goal is to kind of evenly coat the outside of the plant. These epiphytes are absorbing moisture and nutrients through the trichomes on their leaves, which are the tiny little hairs. That's what makes some of them appear gray, white, silvery, fuzzy, is those really dense trichomes. And they're a lot denser in drier regions because they're trying to collect as much moisture as possible and protect the leaves from the UV light. So the goal is just to saturate them. You don't need to worry too much about watering the roots and stuff like that. I think there's more research to be done still on the role of roots within tillandsias, because it's not like orchids where the roots really do a lot of the labor in terms of uptake of moisture and nutrients. The trichomes are the real hero for the tillandsias, and they do most of that. So as long as you're getting the leaves wet, and then beyond that, those trichomes not only are absorbing moisture and nutrients, but that's also how they complete photosynthesis and respire. Oh. So along with getting the plant wet, it's also important to make sure that the plant dries off. If the plant never dries off, those trichomes stay wet, and it's like trying to take a breath in underwater. You just can't do it. So those trichomes do need to dry off, and that's why growing inside can sometimes be challenging, where you have no airflow. The plant stays wet for a long period of time and basically suffocates.
Okay, so maybe like an early morning watering is better than an evening, because then, it dries off, versus if you do an evening, it stays wet, through the whole night and into the next morning.
Exactly. The only exception I'd say to that is like during those Santa Ana periods, I'll switch to afternoon watering because I do want them to stay wet for a little bit longer. So when it's really hot and dry, I might switch to evening waterings. But otherwise, mornings are recommended.
We all can agree that during Santa Ana's, we all are constant in state of need of water. Yeah. Just walking outside.
We all dry out.
Yeah, exactly. So, completely understandable. Yeah. Hey, now, you mentioned the blooming cycle on these plants, as far as, once they do bloom, it's for reproduction. A lot of times they'll either produce a seed or, pups or sports or new tillandsias. Is there, and let's just take it for the varieties here in Southern California, so some of the more dry. Is there a season for them? Like, to actually, do you see more blooms happen in the spring or in the summer, or, anything like that? Or is it just kind of each plant is on its own with its own cycle?
Yeah, what has been surmised about them is that for the most part, their blooms are timed up with the seeds ripening in the spring. So that means that you're going to have blooms at a variety of different times during the year because they take so long to develop. And the seed pods themselves are not necessarily quick to ripen either. There are some that, in 2 months might be ready to pop, but Tillandsia ionantha, for example, one of the more common ones, it takes up to 2 years from the time that the flower opens to the seed pod being ready to open.
Oh, wow.
So, the blooming period varies quite a bit, and it generally times up with the springtime, the seeds popping open.
Oh, okay. But, that could be happening a year before. That could be happening a month before, a lot of time. Hey, we are going to take another break here in about a minute, Andy. When we get back from the break, we'll wrap up chatting with Andy Cuffel and Cuffel Farms. Maybe talk about some of the cool things that he's got on his website. Lots of good information, lots of good tillandsias to be able to purchase. So when we get back, we will wrap up chatting with Andy.
Yeah, back even quicker on Facebook Live. Those tuned in on Biz Talk Radio News coming up right now. We're back at 6 minutes after. Hopefully you can catch us with hour number 2. I'm Brian Main, John Begnasker, Tiger Palafox. We thank you so much for supporting our show. Thank you to Fertilome. This is Garden America. We welcome you back, those on Biz Talk Radio, the start of hour number 2. Facebook Live, questions, comments as we continue this morning. Thank you for tuning in. John Bagnasco, Tiger Palafox. I'm Brian Main as we continue and wrap things up with Andy. Tiger?
Yeah, so again, we're chatting with Andy Cuffel with Cuffel Farms, a local Tillandsia grower here in San Diego. And Andy, I'm actually on your website as we're talking right now and seeing all this fun stuff that you have as far as Tillandsias, different collections, different species. And I mean, way to go as far as getting into a business when we're in such a world of shipping.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
talk about I might be, I don't know, overstepping here in what I'm saying, but talk about an easy plant to ship, right? I mean, like a Tillandsia, like
Yeah.
you can throw it in a box and maybe make it so it doesn't move around so much, and it's a lightweight box,
Yep.
and it probably ships really easy. So,
Oh, yeah.
you know, for people that are interested, it's really easy to get a hold of these, right?
Oh yeah, I ship all over the world. Got some going to Hawaii next week. Just recently went to Taiwan, Japan. Yeah, it's amazing, you know, how many plants you can get into a box and how little that box weighs. So it's really advantageous in that way. I'd certainly recommend, you know, for people in really hot or really cold places, not to order them during those extreme periods.
No.
We can ship with heat packs during the winter, blah blah blah, but usually best to wait so that you can give the plant a season to acclimate during milder conditions.
Hey,
Yeah.
Andy, it doesn't sound like a good Arizona desert plant for the most part, is it?
Certainly not for outdoor growing.
Right,
but
right.
I will say one of the most talented Tillandsia hybridizers. You know, he created probably the most famous Tillandsia hybrid around, Tillandsia Curly Slim. His name is Mark Dimmitt, and he's out in Arizona. You know, he kind of moved on from Tillandsias and focuses more on euphorbias and other things now. But you'd be surprised some of the places that people have chosen to take on this hobby.
Oh,
Just lots of water, I guess, outside.
Oh, yeah.
You got to
Well, you
create
know-
that rainforest.
I was wondering about that too because one of our faithful listeners, Hastam from Pakistan, is on the line, and I was wondering, could you adapt those to that particular area, but maybe that it might have to be indoors in the hotter part of the year, huh?
Yeah, I think you'd be pretty confined to indoor growing. I'd say, you know, species dependent for sure, but for the most part, if you're between 40 degrees and 95 degrees, there's a place for a Tillandsia in your landscape. And then, you know, as you drop down into freezing and as you get up into triple digits, it's probably good to give them a little bit of protection.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then back to your kind of shop, you ship year round. So people can go onto your website anytime. You kind of tell them what's in stock, what's out of stock, and you can kind of ship year round. I mean, you mentioned the notes as far as like, you know, if you live in Arizona, you might not want to receive a shipment right now. It's pretty hot,
Yeah.
and that FedEx building is not exactly climate controlled all the time.
Yeah.
You know, but if you're ready to receive your Tillandsias, you'll ship them for them, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm also, you know, I part of the reason that I got into this, one was out of necessity because I wanted to keep collecting, but I couldn't afford to, so I had to start, you know, hawking some of the plants that I had already bought. But the other part too was it felt so hard to get real information about how to care for these plants that properly educating people is really important to me. So if you're browsing the website and you're seeing that there's hundreds of different plants and you're overwhelmed by that, feel free to reach out. Like, I'm happy to, you know, make recommendations on good places to start. There is a section called Easy to Care For. There's, you know, care guides posted on there. And also, if you're here in Southern California, you can come visit me in person. You can make an appointment right there on the website to come to the nursery, and I'll tell you everything I've ever learned about these plants if that's what you want to know. But, yeah, education is really important to me, and I want people to be successful with these. It's good for the industry if people are successful with these. So, you know, sometimes it just takes getting the right information and making a few adjustments.
Yeah. And like he said, he's got Air Plant Care, where a starter's guide, frequently asked questions, and also an in-depth guide.
Yeah.
So
deep dive.
lots of good information. Andy, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Thanks for sharing all the information regarding air plants. I think you answered a lot of questions for people. I think you also inspired a lot of people. And, you know, if you're listening right now, go take a look at his website. All right. Andy, have a great rest of the weekend.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Take care.
You got to
Bye-bye.
take care.
He kind of sounds like John, but he went on a different path. You know, he's like, oh, I really am just like a collector of things. I got inspired, and this was just something that, you know, John went down roses, he went down houseplants, you know, all that. And it kind of sounds like the same story, but just he chose air plants. John.
Yeah, if you have a passion about something, you're going to be successful no matter what. And even if it's not monetary success, you
He
know,
seems happy.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a personal success, you know, and that's the best way, I think, to be happy living your life.
Well, I like the story you told about roses when somebody asked you how many you had. How many roses are you growing? John said, none. I
He was
don't
the
have
rose
any.
buyer.
And so you have the audacity to tell
start
us
out,
about
yeah.
roses,
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's how John got into it.
That's true.
Do you have any air plants, Brian?
No,
No?
not now. No. Uh-uh.
No.
I had some. You know what? I had for a period of time. I had some orchids outside in the patio years ago that did well. They were in direct sun under the eave.
But you know that
none now.
that's a perfect area in
It is,
your
isn't it?
patio for different types of tillandsias.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You just stick them in there and not have to worry about
Yeah.
it.
I'm starting a epiphyte section of my yard.
Really?
You know where you gave us those plugs of coral bells and
Oh
what were
yeah,
some other ones. There were some other different plants.
the hellebores.
Hellebores, yeah. In that area, I created a little mister. It's a shadier kind of area, and so I've started to put all my old orchids that are not in bloom over there because I'm like, oh, they'll just live there. You know, I don't need to water them. They got the mister system. Put some old bromeliads there. I'm gonna put some tillandsias there. I'm just gonna try to create a whole little epiphytic area for all my plants. And then when they, then like we talked about, when they come into bloom, I'll bring them inside. When they go out,
Just have your own cloud forest over there.
exactly.
What a great name for a sports team, the Fighting Epiphytes.
I don't know if great is the adjective I would use.
And those would people would go, wait, what? Is that an animal? What's an epiphyte?
yeah,
Those that are not in the know.
Yeah.
The Fighting Epiphytes.
It's funny when there's those mascots and you kind of look
Yeah,
and you're like, what is that?
What does that have to do? It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the name of the team.
Yeah.
There's a team in, I think it's California, Northern California, the banana slugs.
Yes,
And
it's
that's
Santa
Stanford.
Cruz.
Santa Cruz.
Is it Santa?
Yeah.
Yes, because I remember when I was doing Aztec basketball games,
Yeah.
they'd be on the floor, and I'm like, what? How does that relate? I'm not sure
Because
what.
in Santa Cruz, they have, do you know what a banana slug is?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. They have them. So that's their mascot, but like, that's not a good one.
It's not a good one. And here's another one.
Like, you can't be a fighting banana slug.
Tara says the angry aphids. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're getting into it. Okay, here, case in point, Vancouver Canucks hockey team in the NHL.
Okay.
Okay, their logo is an orca.
Like a whale?
Yeah.
Okay. But they're the Canucks? Because
Yes, you bring up a good point. Their old logo was a lumberjack,
Okay.
with a hatchet, Canuck, Canadian.
yeah.
Just because regionally, off the coast of Vancouver, BC, there's orcas. Okay, but I just don't. I mean, I get the connection, but I don't get why you've chosen that.
Because they're mean.
It just,
And then
Makes
the
more
lumberjacks
sense
are
than
not
the
as mean.
Utah Jazz, though, doesn't it?
that was another one. Now, when they were in New Orleans, that made a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
New Orleans Jazz, and they
Yes.
just
Utah,
kept the name.
Not so much.
But now that the Arizona Coyotes have moved to Utah, they've dropped the name.
Yeah.
They're not going to be Coyotes. For 1 year, they're going to be the Utah Hockey Club. Just like the Redskins for 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah,
They were
the
the Washington Football Club until they got their name. Anyway, drifting off into mascots, John?
Yes. Well, our friend Tanya in San Jose Tiger wants to know the website again for
Oh.
Andy.
CuffleFarms.com. So that's CuffleFarms.
Did you put the link up on our Facebook?
You know what? I don't think I did, but I am going to post it right now because
Okay.
I posted those pictures, but I'm going to do the
And while you do that, while you do that, we're going to take a break, John. How about that?
Oh, okay.
So a little respite here as we take a break on Garden America to pay some bills. And our good friends, of course, broadcasting on Biz Talk Radio, the Biz Talk Radio Network. So stay with us. Those on Facebook Live, any more questions or comments, please post them right there in the comment section. I'm Brian Main, John Bagnasco, Tiger Palafox. We'll be back after these messages on Biz Talk Radio. All righty. How about that? We are back, ready to go as we continue here on Garden America. Biz Talk Radio, Facebook Live, and Tiger posted that link on the website. There is the URL right there. Those on Facebook Live, you can just click it, and there you go.
All kinds of
all
fun
the
stuff.
information you need.
Another good question for Tiger.
Okay.
Because Lila and Poway wants to know how close to a pool you can plant a citrus tree.
Ooh, how close to a pool? So
You want
I
it-
have.
Don't you want it to be? I'm sure you're going to mention root systems and things, but then citrus drop stuff too. So you don't want that dropping into the pool, right?
What about
Definitely.
chlorine splashing on a citrus tree?
So I have answers to all of these questions because
Because you
I
have
have
experience.
I have a lemon tree that is 2 feet away from a swimming pool. Okay. And then I've got a lime tree that is about 10 feet away from the swimming pool. And they're both kind of in similar situations, but just one is farther away from the swimming pool than the other. And, we know that we'll start off with the watering. We know that citrus really like deep, kind of infrequent watering.
Mm-hmm.
And having it 2 feet away from the swimming pool makes it very wet because my kids are constantly splashing. And it's chlorine water, like you're saying.
It's chlorine, right?
So the lemon
and
tree,
there's chemicals in there.
And so the lemon tree, I would say, is growing, but it is struggling. Where the same kind of similar area, I got this lime tree, it is thriving.
But which
Okay.
one is 10 feet away?
The lime tree.
And
So
it's
the lime
thriving.
tree is thriving.
Because it's far enough away from the pool.
lemon tree is struggling. I think it's getting a little bit over water, and I think, like what you said, I think the chemicals from the pool water
Yeah.
going into it. And then, kind of what John says, the issue that I have with the lemon tree is that they fall into the pool. So I have actual lemons that are falling into the swimming pool, and those are not fun to fall into your swimming pool. And and then everything else, the flowers that they do, because you got to remember the citrus flower a lot and they don't all turn into fruit, so all those flower
Right.
petals drop and make a mess.
So 10 feet you think is maybe the answer, at least?
I was going to say, I think, you want to get it far enough away where the water splash out from the pool doesn't affect the tree. So that's at least probably 6 to 7 feet. And then again, falling into the pool, depending on how large you let that citrus get, could be, another, like you're saying, 6, maybe 10 feet away, I think is good. So I would not recommend putting the citrus tree right next to the pool, but
What came first, the pool or the citrus trees?
the pool came first.
Okay.
The citrus trees came second. I put the lemon tree.
So what Brian's saying is this is all your fault.
No, I did. But I put the lemon tree in a specific location because I wanted to grow up and create this privacy bridge right there.
Okay.
And but we'll see.
Well, you know what?
I can combat it. I know I made the mistake, Brian.
But had you not done that, you would be less capable of answering this question.
Yeah, exactly.
So see?
I have real life experience. Oh, and by the way, it also, because I've seen and made this mistake before. It also, not all pools are chlorine pools nowadays. A lot of people have those saltwater pools.
Right.
And that is even, I think,
Worse.
worse than the
Right.
chlorine pool for the surrounding landscape when you deal with splash over and things like that. So,
Yeah,
Well, I
'cause
thought
now-
that
would that change the-
saltwater pools
change
still
the
use
pH?
chlorine, but just not as much. I mean, they
That
don't
is
use
true,
salt, do
but
they?
so they use salt as
Yeah, filtration.
well, not just as filtration, but they use salt to create the specific level of the water.
Uh-huh.
So that way, like you're saying, you don't have to use as much chlorine.
Right.
But it's the same saltiness as a teardrap, or
Oh, right.
So basically, you're supposed to open your eyes underwater and have it be like it doesn't.
It's okay.
It doesn't affect you. That's the salt. It's not a high. It's not like ocean water. In a salted pool, but it's still a good amount of salt that
Sure.
you get a lot of splash over, and your plants become affected by, and that stays in the soil. We've talked about this before, where salt stays in the soil. So
It would
definitely
change the
using,
pH after a while if
Yeah.
enough water got in there, wouldn't it?
I mean,
some degree.
it'll affect it, but that's where I kind of get behind the whole using the organics.
Yeah.
Make sure you're amending your soil well and stuff like that in those areas, because you don't want to be adding more chemicals to an area where you get a lot of splash over from a pool.
You want to answer that question, John?
Well,
Where are you? Which one are
we've
you
got
on?
several questions here. The first one is from our good friend Sherry.
Okay.
And
The tomato grower.
the tomato grower in the pink Bohemia grower.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's
Pink orchid
Farmer
tree.
Sherry.
Yeah. Anyway, Sherry wants to know any news on the next Garden America trip.
We were just talking about that this morning.
Yeah.
And
We
no.
don't know. We're tossing it around.
Yeah, we're talking about it. I don't have any particular news to share.
We talked about a trip to your place, Sherry. Bring some listeners out there to take a look at your yard.
Yeah, she has so much. She's got snakes fighting with rabbits.
Right.
She's got 10-pound tomatoes, pink Bohemias.
Tiger mentioned that he had sent a message and hadn't heard back, so he's going to follow up.
Yeah.
He's been working on the trip, though. Let's see. Another pool question, Tiger.
All right.
Regarding planning around the pool, he needs a John needs a recommendation for something to use as a living screen around a spa, and it has to be resistant to those kinds of chemicals.
Okay, so podocarpus, very hardy. Texas privets, also very hardest. Ligustrum, depending on how tall you want the screen to get. And also, I'm trying to have things that don't fall too much. Meaning, podocarpus, podocarpus and ligustrums, they keep their foliage pretty well, and you can hedge them. So during their bloom cycle, I had somebody show me a picture. They came in, I was working with them, and they showed me this beautiful ligustrum hedge on their back of their property, doing exactly what it should be doing, and it was in full bloom. And he's like, I hate this. And I was like, you got to explain more. I don't understand what you hate about this. This is doing what it's exactly supposed to be doing. He's
And
like,
how tall was it?
it was about 7 feet tall.
Oh my gosh!
Dense, full bloom ligustrum.
The
He's
nice
like,
barrier.
yeah, and he's like, no, it's blooming. I thought these weren't supposed to flower. And I was like, well, let me talk to you a little bit about the birds and the bees
Wouldn't
here.
that be icing on the cake?
You know, like all things need to flower. Right. But number two, I was like, you just cut them off. If you don't like the flower, the nice thing about the Texas privet is it's a hedge. So you can literally just hedge it and remove all the flowers. And he wanted something that never flowered. And I was like, well, that's not going to.
There's not a lot of ferns that make
make a good hedge.
I think that would be a bonus. And it flowers too. How about that?
So anyways, back to the answer to the question about a privacy screen. Ligustrums create a beautiful privacy screen. They're very hardy to, pool chemicals, spa chemicals, all that stuff. They do flower, but again, you can hedge them and remove the flower very easily. It doesn't hurt the plant at all. Podocarpus, if you need something maybe a little taller, is another option there.
What about, I was
We're going
thinking,
to take a break, guys. Here.
thinking of the guy you were talking about, and we'll talk a little bit more about some maybe coniferous alternatives when we get back.
We
from
will
the
do
break.
that. We're going to take a break. This is Garden America. All righty, we promised we'd be back, and we are back. We have two more segments. This is the longer segment of the two remaining. So this is the time, the place to get your questions, your comments in there, discuss what you want to discuss. Maybe you want to take the discussion into a different direction. That's okay, too. No barriers, no boundaries.
Now, before the break, John had mentioned another option, and he mentioned a coniferous, like a juniper,
Right.
Would be great. Nice, dense, clean. Maybe tiny tower cypress. You can create a little cypress barrier or something like that as well.
If you're not in a hurry.
Or you have a lot of money, you can just buy the really big ones.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was having that conversation this week with a customer, and because we were talking about their landscaping, putting it in, and budget. I'm like, well, when it comes to plants, time is money. So if you don't want to spend a lot of time growing these plants,
right,
you just got to have a lot of money. But if you don't have a lot of money, but if you just don't have a lot of money to
Here's some
spend,
seeds.
Yeah, and wait 35 years,
which I do.
Yeah, exactly.
With things I can't buy otherwise. Now, here's a new one for me. I've never heard this term before.
Yeah.
So it's either
That's
new,
trouble.
it's either new
Or not true.
or I'm just not aware of it. But John said that somebody suggested for a screen to use cowboy grass.
I don't know what cowboy grass is either. Cowboy grass.
Cowboy grass. Why don't you
I mean,
Google
wheat?
that real quick?
Well, tiger.
Well, it's probably the scientific name, otherwise known as cowboy grass, obviously.
Yeah, I've just never heard of that. While we're doing that, Carlo says, Tiger, have you had trouble with disease?
With the citrus?
Oh, there's more to it.
Vincas.
Or me getting
It wasn't a
diseases.
personal question. She says, on your vincas at the nursery, she bought some at Armstrong's and they shriveled and died, but they were nice enough to replace them.
Yeah.
There was that aerial Phytophthora going around for a while.
But wasn't that with only impatiens? Or am I thinking something different? Impatiens had a big disease issue,
Yeah.
but that's not the same thing.
I thought that vinca had the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know because we couldn't get impatiens for a long time.
Right.
Because of
Yeah,
that
now
issue.
they're back again, right?
Yeah. So maybe, if you're saying it also affected the vinca. Maybe,
Yeah, what happens is you'll notice sometimes it hits one branch and you just have one, like half a vinca just shrivels up and dies.
Yeah.
But then other times the whole plant.
Shrinkage.
Shrinkage, yeah.
I have not. And, the issue with what John is talking about, it's almost like it's unavoidable. Like this isn't, we can talk a lot about protection, like we can talk about fertilization and plant health and make sure you're not overwatering to prevent root rot or, mildew by not watering the foliage. This is something that, is a lot of it's soil borne, a lot of it's passed throughout, ornamental plants and things like that. That's kind of unavoidable. Yes, from an ornamental plant production level, they can do things like treat the soil and sterilize and all that. But for the home gardener, it's kind of a tough thing. But I have not had too much of an issue with the vinca. So I'm not sure. But I do know that, we have full stock of the plants. And like I said before, also the impatiens are back again as well from that disease issue.
Well, also, as I think about it, vinca are native to Madagascar, and they like hot, drier conditions. And Carla being close to the beach, it's going to have, in Huntington Beach, going to have cooler conditions.
Cool and windy as well.
Which is fine, but then you have to make sure maybe you cut back a little on the water that they don't get quite as much water.
Yeah, because in vinca really don't need a ton. Of
No.
water. Like you say, you go to Palm Springs and they plant beautiful vinca
Right.
borders.
Mhm.
And yeah, they do provide them with a lot of water, but it's 110 outside and they're just
Yeah.
blooming and looking gorgeous.
Or more even.
Okay, John says that he thinks that cowboy grass might be one of those tall pampas grass type plants.
Yeah, so when I typed in cowboy grass plant, aside from a cologne by
That's
DS
the kind of clone I
Durga.
want to buy, cowboy grass.
They mention they have a variety of grasses, molly grass, pennisedums, and things like that. I would not recommend a grass like that as a border. This was for the spa, right?
Right.
Because number one, all of them bloom and they create, messes. So,
Right.
And yeah, we can sit here and say you cut the blooms off, but then your privacy is non-existent because you have to cut and then number two, like I say, all these grasses, in order to look good, you really have to cut them down to about 6 inches tall
Yeah.
once to twice a year, because otherwise what happens is they just get filled with that
Oh, yeah.
all
the old dead stuff.
growth, and it doesn't look good after 2 or 3 years. So again, you go back to this privacy issue that, yeah, you might have privacy or some screen for 3 months, but then you're without it for 6 months, during the growing cycle. But I think the biggest thing though is the blooms. All those grasses produce blooms that are very messy. And if it's anywhere near any kind of spa or pool, it's going to make it very messy.
They are fast growing.
They are.
Yeah.
I have some purple pennisetums, and they're blooming right now. They look spectacular, but the reason they look spectacular is because I have 4 clumps, which came from one clump that I dug up last spring.
Yeah.
And jackhammered apart into 4 pieces, and still had a lot left over, and threw that away. And right now they look great.
And they look great too because they're kind of like in the landscape,
Right.
and they move with
Yeah,
the
over
wind.
by the road, and,
exactly.
Not by a pond.
Yeah,
or
not
pool.
by a pond or by your
Right.
patio where you're constantly cleaning up the mess. Exactly. But so, yeah, I mean, because the other thing too we work with is plants when we want them to get a certain height, they naturally get a certain width, meaning if a plant is 4 feet tall, it's probably going to be 4 feet wide. It's not very often that you get a plant that's 4 feet tall and 2 feet wide. But grasses and some of these hedge style plants can do that, unless you have the space. But, normally they get a lot wider or just as wide as they do tall plants. So
It's all about proportion.
mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll just be falling over.
It's the molecules.
Yeah, man, exactly.
Yeah.
We're
that
caught
answer?
up, I think, John, right?
We are on the questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
John says thanks.
Good.
He appreciates the info.
Yeah.
With I'm not sure what kind of temperatures you guys are getting, but we're looking back up to 98 on this coming Wednesday.
We would be high 80s. We'd
Really?
be about 10 degrees less than you, generally speaking.
It's just so hot. I could barely keep up with the water.
It's
I'm watering every day now.
yeah.
And after my tooth extraction, I can't really do much except hold a hose.
Well, your head must hurt being out there in the sun and the heat too.
Yeah.
It's just throbbing out there. You can only be out there for prolonged period. Do you have the AC running inside?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I don't really like air conditioning, though.
Really?
But I mean,
No?
if you didn't have it, what would your house indoor temperature be?
Well, it stays.
81.
Well, yeah, that's where we are. 80, 81.
Like if I don't run my AC, my house is 80, 81.
Yeah.
Which is too warm.
Yeah, we might be like 78.
If you didn't run your AC.
Yeah.
You know how
Oh, you
some
get
of
a
the
nice
pools.
little breeze and
No, not the breeze. I think we have such high ceilings
Insulated and all that.
and really well insulated that it would have to be over 100 outside
You know how
to
some
be
of the pools,
unbearable
like Palm
inside.
Springs is a good example. You go up in the pool and you lounge around, and they have the misters
yeah.
going. That's what you need on your patio. You need misters up above, so when
We
you're
have those
outside,
for the chickens.
you take better care of the chickens than yourself. Misters for the chickens.
He just needs to wear a hat that has like a little
Inside,
AC
yes, AC
around him.
and maybe even a little, mister inside.
Didn't they used to have things you put around your neck that were cool?
They do. They do have them.
There was
Still
a guy
do have
watched
them.
a YouTube video last night. This guy's out in Death Valley right now, so you can imagine.
Yeah.
And he had this white, covered his ears, covered his neck. All you saw were sunglasses
Yeah.
and a hat on.
It didn't break the record this year, right? Like, weren't they saying like the record is like 130 or something?
I think so.
And I think it hit like 129 or real close, but I don't think it broke.
That would just you step outside, your breath goes away.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks the breath out of you, literally.
You could fry an egg on the sidewalk out there.
I think so.
Lenore says that out in Canyon Country,
Mm-hmm.
it's over 100 every day.
Yeah, and that is the other challenge is when you live in those areas is when you don't get the break.
Exactly.
Because like kind of like John just mentioned here, he's like, oh, it's supposed to get warm again. We've been, this morning when we drove in, it was
nice.
cloudy and
It was
cool. It was not
Hey,
too
speaking
bad.
of breaks, we have one coming up. That was good, Tiger. One more segment coming up here, the short segment here on Garden America. Of course, we invite you to stay with us, those on Biz Talk Radio, Facebook Live. And, of course, time for some last-minute questions, comments, too, here on Garden America. Stay with us. Yes, indeed. We have made it to the final segment here on Garden America. We thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the people on Facebook Live, those that support us on Biz Talk Radio, our major sponsor, Fertilome. Can't mention them enough, thank them enough, so thank you all. That's why we're here, John.
Yeah.
Why the door opens every week for us.
Veronica wants to know what a good spray to use for fig beetles on her trees. You know, that was one of the pictures by coincidence. I think Martin in Houston, California, put in the what's growing in my yard, and he had fig beetles, green fig beetles.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And do you have any if you go to the UC Davis website, UC Davis has all kinds of pest control information, and they have one for fig beetles, and they don't recommend spraying because it's just not going to work. So do you have any tips on that, Tiger?
On the fig beetles?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
the thing that I think that you probably would have the most luck with is making a trap.
yeah.
And you can make those out of, if you go on the internet, you'll find out how to do it, but you can make a trap with, I forget what they use at the bottom, some type of syrup or something. Figs. Fig Newtons.
Yeah, exactly.
But you make them out of plastic bottles, and then they go in there and they get
can't
trapped.
fly out.
Yeah.
Right, and they can't fly out, and you just throw them away.
Yeah, kind of like the fly traps.
Yeah, and that's way better than spraying.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I mean, the spraying, number one, you're not guaranteed to affect them at all, and they're kind of hit and miss as far as being able to actually, have them eat anything. So, the trap probably, is probably the best thing. Isn't there also, where are they a grub? I can't remember.
Well,
The big beetles?
They start from grubs,
Right.
yeah.
So that's the other thing that you can work on is if you have a yard that has a lot of them, because that's the thing with fig beetles too, is they could be coming from anywhere.
Yeah.
They
They
don't
fly.
yeah, they don't have to just come from your yard. But if you do notice a lot in your yard, you can start off by using products that would kill the grubs before they, turn into the beetles. So therefore, you minimize the population.
Yeah, because they can come from elsewhere as well.
But I mean, that's not going to stop them from, like we say, coming from your neighbor's yard. But if you do have a yard that you think they're coming from, like you're producing them for everyone else, then you can start by treating your yard for grubs.
Sometimes if you have a compost pile, they'll be in there
be in
too.
there a lot.
Yeah, a lot of the grubs are in there.
Lila
wanted to know if
yeah.
the 10-foot that you mentioned for the citrus being from the pool was 10 foot from the trunk or 10 foot from the outer canopy.
10 foot from the outer. I mean, a citrus tree's outer canopy isn't probably going to get 10 feet. So 10 feet from the trunk is probably going to put it at least like 5 feet
And
from
you
the
could
pool,
control
like the outer canopy.
You could control the canopy.
So I'd say 10 feet from the trunk is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like she doesn't have a pool. But her question is that she does have the citrus tree.
Yeah.
So she's trying to figure where to put
the pool?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd say 10 feet from the trunk.
Which is different than what you did.
We didn't answer this question that I know of. Joseph wrote, I'm starting a monarch butterfly and bee garden to help my fruit trees. What milkweeds in El Cajon? And, I don't think we've hit this topic in a little while, but I'll just hit it real quick. The different milkweeds. So there's native milkweeds, there's tropical milkweeds, there's all. What was Family Jewels milkweed in Costa Rica?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, the one that you made me take a picture with.
Yeah.
Well, that's because it was the biggest tree I'd ever seen like that.
Yeah.
I mean, usually they're smaller plants.
Yeah. But so there's a lot of milkweeds out there, and there's a lot of discussion about what milkweeds to plant in your area. And I think that we can all agree that planting the native milkweed to your region is always a great thing to do. There's no harm in that. So if you're in El Cajon, Moosa Creek Nursery is a native plant grower here in San Diego that produces a variety of milkweeds native to our region. And you can find them at different local retailers or order them online. But at the same time, I think we can also, and I've gotten told this by a number of monarch conservatory people, that, providing them with any kind of milkweed is also very good. So whether it's the tropical milkweed or the native milkweed, it's good to attract and provide them a food source. There's discussion of the tropical milkweed passing on different diseases or bacterias. I can't remember, something that would make the caterpillar ill. But, it's almost like, well, it's better to have some food than no food at all, kind of a thing. So I hope that answered your question. But
What about bees?
Bees attract bees? Rosemary.
Rosemary? Yeah,
rosemary and carapia.
Yeah, rosemary, crappie, and also African blue basil.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you plant
geez.
African blue basil,
the plant will be humming.
yeah, literally humming.
So bees are, I don't know. I mean, there's so many things that attract bees. I mean, really easy plants. Like we talked about rosemary, basil, oregano, ice plant, so many things attract bees. But if you want to attract native bees and not just the European bees, then you can kind of dive into that. And again, Moosa Creek Nursery has a whole list of these different plants that are native too.
Lisa says that they're having a cold spell in Reading, that it's
What is
going
it,
back
95?
down into the high 80s and low 90s.
Oh, goodness.
And they would notice that too.
Grab your jackets.
Yeah.
Lisa also mentioned last week that she waved hi to me when she was passing Fallbrook. Want to know if she saw me wave back.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it, guys. You got
What?
one more quick one, John?
Let's see.
Better hurry.
Quick.
Hurry. Go. Hurry.
Nope.
Clocks are ticking.
Nothing,
Okay.
Nothing.
We're done.
Nothing I can do quick.
We are done. Thank you for joining us. Thank
But
you
we'll
again.
come back next week.
We're going to
Yeah.
be back again next week. That's
Keeping our
right.
tropical theme. We're going to be going into some house plants and tropicals again.
Do we have a guest for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to keep it tropical.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a safe week upcoming, and be sure to join us. We're going to reconvene next week right here in the same studio, San Diego, California, iHeartMedia and Entertainment Studios. I'm Brian Main. John Begnasker, Tiger Palafox. Have a good one. Take care. We'll see you next week right here on Garden America. Take care.